Hey there everyone, Rajat here. So in today's video, I'm going to tell you about 4 programming languages a new beginner programmer can pick up and learn in order to become a proficient software developer. Now, picking up your very first programming language can be more like proposing to that one girl you have been eyeing for quite some time, and you are going to propose to that one girl for the very first time in your life. So it really is a mentally taxing procedure every new programmer has to go through. So in today's video, I am just trying to alleviate some of those mental stress. So in today's video, I'm going to tell you about 4 programming languages which can be a really great option for any new programmer to pick up. So if you have been contemplating learning software development or picking up your first programming language, this is the right video for you, and you should really watch it till the end so that you know what your options are and how to go about picking up your very first programming language. So without any further ado, let's dive right into the topic and see what we are talking about. I am going to rank these languages on 2 scales. The first scale would be how easier are these languages for new programmer, what is the learning curve like, and the second scale would be the ease of employment after learning these languages. So the very first language on my list, and I'm going to arrange this language in ascending order, which means that the language at the number 1 spot is the language which has a pretty low learning curve and a very great market out there for getting jobs. Okay, so the very first language, or you can say the number 4 spot on this list, is C++. Now let's talk about the ease of learning. C++ is not very beginner friendly language, so you need to learn a quite deal about object-oriented programming and pointers and things like that. In case you really want to become a proficient C++ programmer, then you also have to learn about memory management and all, because there is no garbage collector in C++. So you must be wondering whether C is on this list or not. And here is the thing, C is not there on this list. The reason I have skipped C is that because C++ has everything C has, plus there is some extra functionality. So in case you learn how to deal with C++, you will also learn how to work really close to the metal, and that is the whole sole reason behind proposing learning C in the very first place. So if you learn C++, you are bound to learn all of those memory management and working with the standard library things. So learning curve is pretty huge in C++, because you have to learn a great deal about standard library, then object-oriented programming as I have talked about, then memory management, pointers and things like that. Okay, let's move on to the employment part. Now, in my personal opinion, the employment market in C++ is not that great, because the companies who employ C++ programmers are mostly companies who are dealing with low-level devices like IoT devices, or writing chipsets and firmware softwares for ACs, freezers and things like that. So these industries employ veteran programmers, and they choose to favor veteran programmers because C++ is a very old language. So people have been writing some C++ code for decades now, and if you try to build a career in C++, you are going to go up against such people, right? I'm not saying that companies are not hiring new C++ developers. The thing is that there are not that many jobs in this field. So if you talk about getting employed and getting paid well in C++, I think that you are going to face some intense competition from veteran programmers. That is my perception. That is what I have seen in the industry, because I was also researching to learn C++ and then get good paying jobs, but turned out like it was not a very great move to take. Hence I passed on that opportunity. But yes, if you talk about market, this is a scenario. Now we are also building a new market for C++ programmers using WebAssembly, because if you have been keeping a real close tabs on the industry, WebAssembly is really taking the industry by storm, because using WebAssembly you can use C++ or Rust to write really performant code for your web applications, but that market is still not there yet. In case you are targeting to be employed in 2 or 3 years down the lane, then only you can be really wishful that you are going to learn a bunch of C++ and then you are going to find jobs in web assembly and things like that. But if you talk about current market of 2019 and 20, there are not many jobs for C++ programmer, and this is the reality of getting employed as a C++ programmer. So the competition is going to be pretty high and there are just not that many jobs out there. Moving on to the other language, and that language is Java Standard Edition. So let's talk about the learning curve. Now again, Java is very verbose language, which means that you have to write quite a lot of code in order to get the least amount of work done. Also, when you write this much of code, you are also bound to know and understand why you have written that much of code, which means that as a new programmer, you really have to be well aware of concepts like static, public, and classes and object-oriented programming from the get-go. So the learning curve for a new programmer is pretty huge, because even if you want to write a simple hello world program, you need to be well aware of what are class accessors, what do you mean by the keyword static, and things like that. So for a new programmer, it is quite a deal to learn these many things and learn these things in a proper way. So the learning curve is quite huge. Okay, then you also need to be aware of concepts like abstract classes and multi-threading and all, even if you want to write some basic command line program, because companies expect you to know at least this much stuff in Java Standard Edition. Because I have sat for the interviews of Java Standard Edition, and most of the companies were expecting me to know multi-threading, and multi-threading is not something one can get pretty easily or one can learn pretty easily. Okay, but yes, if you do not care much about multi-threading and writing some enterprise grade software using Java, picking up Java is not really that hard. It is a good language for new programmer. Now coming to the employment part. Now I believe that if you learn Java, the employment market is pretty huge, so you can become a Java developer pretty easily. And also then you can also learn enterprise grade Java, which means learning J2E or something like a Spring Boot, in order to make yourself a enterprise grade web developer or the backend developer, which means that you can get a great paying job as a backend developer, and the pay scale is going to be higher than someone who is only dealing with Java Standard Edition. So the employment market is pretty huge, because most of these traditional companies like banks and services industries and other monolithic companies have been Java for their enterprise grade softwares for ages now. So finding a job after learning Java is pretty easy. Moving on to our next language that is sitting at the spot number 2 is JavaScript. Now JavaScript is an ubiquitous language, which means that it can be found on the back end, it can be found on the front end, it can be found in your browsers. Then you can also write desktop class applications using JavaScript using this framework Electron. So let's talk about the learning curve. Now in my personal opinion, I think that JavaScript makes you really productive from the get-go. So there is not a whole lot of things which a new programmer has to learn and understand before writing his first program. So if you want to write a hello world program, console.log hello world will do the trick for you. You do not really have to learn what object-oriented programming is and what sort of programming styles are you actually using in your programming language. If you write a simple adder function, you can just start with writing a function statement, and then you can create a function for yourself. So it is very easy to pick up. It is not going to bog you down into details of why things are being done in a way they are being done in JavaScript land. Obviously, it is a language which has a reputation that it is very very confusing for developers, but that will only come at the later stages when you are trying to move to an intermediate level. But if you talk about being productive in a programming language from the get-go, JavaScript is an awesome choice for that. So you can write really efficient procedures using JavaScript without learning much about object-oriented programming, threads and stacks and calls and things like that. Okay, so that was about the learning part. Now let's come to the employment part. So as we have learned that it is being used on so many frontiers, obviously the job prospects are really bright when it comes to JavaScript. So you can become a backend programmer, then again you can become a front-end developer, then you can also become a UI UX guy who has a knack for building great user experiences for browsers using JavaScript. So you can, cater to these many job profiles, and there are a lot of jobs out there for JavaScript programmers. But here is a disclaimer: since we know that JavaScript is pretty easy to pick up and the job market is huge, so every Tom, Dick and Harry can start with JavaScript and he can be really productive from the get-go, which means that there is intense competition when it comes to getting the job as a JavaScript developer, because quite a lot of people get really proficient in JavaScript in a small amount of time, which actually increases the competition, hence bringing down the pay scale. So that is one thing you can face after learning and becoming a JavaScript developer, and I want you to be really aware of this thing. Okay, so in case you really want to get that really awesome paycheck in JavaScript, I suggest that you should quickly move from the junior JavaScript developer to the intermediate stage in case you are really targeting to get that well-paying job in JavaScript. Now moving on to our very first language, and it caters to multiple careers, even more than the JavaScript land, and that language is Python. The reason I have put Python above JavaScript is that because JavaScript is limited to building softwares like writing, backend, frontend and all, but Python, you can use that language to write software, then you can also use that language for other domains like machine learning, AI, data analytics and all. So these areas kind of branch out into two parallel career, right? So you can become a software developer using Python, you can also become a data guy using Python, hence Python is at the number one spot. Now let's talk about the learning curve when it comes to learning Python. So I think that Python is pretty easy to pick up and there is not a lot of learning curve involved with picking up and being productive when it comes to Python. So the programming style is really very beginner friendly, and all you have to take care of is to take care of those indentations, so beginner programmers can really feel at home and they will not feel like that they are learning something which is very mentally taxing. So you can get really productive from the get-go. You can write half decent program without much learning and much effort. So the learning curve is almost non-existent, I would say. Even if you have never programmed in your life, starting programming with Python is pretty easily and actually fun, because that was my thoughts were when I picked up Python. Okay, so for new programmers, Python is really a fun language to pick up and learn. So writing hello world program in Python is just as simple as writing print hello world, and that is it, and that you are done. There is no complex structure of program involved in writing really simple scripts and programs. Okay, so that is all about the learning curve. And if we talk about the learning curve that is involved in using Python for areas like data analytics, then again I would say there are libraries like NumPy and all, which you can, or any newbie data analytics guy can pick up pretty easily, and these libraries are very beginner friendly or user friendly. So you can employ these libraries in order to write really succinct data analytics script which you can then run on your system. So from that data analytics perspective as well, Python has you covered, and everything is just beginner friendly. Also, if you talk about other resources that are available for learning Python, there is a plethora of learning resources that are available online, and the quality of those resources are pretty great. So beginners can easily find great tutorials about how to go about using one particular set of Python feature, or how to go about employing particular library like Beautiful Soup and all in order to do their work and all. So from documentation part, from resources part, Python has got you covered. This also applies to JavaScript. So I just want to mention, because I think I forgot to mention that for JavaScript, but yes, Python and JavaScript are really great for beginner programmers. Now let's move on to the other scale, that is the market for employment. Now, as we have learned that Python is being used for two independent or kind of dependent verticals, that is software development and data analytics, the prospects are comparatively brighter than JavaScript, which means that you can easily find a job as a Python programmer out there, because quite a lot of companies are posting job requirements related to web developer using Django framework, which is a web development framework based on Python. So you can become a web developer here, or you can become a automation engineer where you are responsible for writing bash scripts and Python scripts which can cross play between each other and do several sort of storekeeping things when it comes to server management. Then you can also add desktop class applications using Python, and this is all related to software engineering side. If you move on to the data analytics sides, many companies are being fascinated with these newer areas, or you can say newer careers. So they are really paying very decent amount of money in order to obtain resources who have this sort of knowledge related to Python and data analytics, because that is a sweet spot, right? So the salaries are decent, there are a lot of job postings out there, and even if you are able to achieve half decent stage in data analytics and all, you are going to get some really well paying jobs in this field. So job prospects are really great if you are a Python developer, and that is a primary reason why Python is on the #1 spot on this list. Because if we talk about software development area, both Python and JavaScript offer the same sort of learning curve and the same sort of job market. But in addition to software engineering, Python also offers or opens up this new area of data analytics for new developers, right? But JavaScript is not used, or you can say not primarily used for data analytics. Hence Python gains an edge when it comes to job prospects. So that is it, guys. Now we have reached to the conclusion of this video. Now in this video I have given you several pointers about what these languages have to offer and how should you reason about picking up your first programming language. In no way I'm proposing that a beginner developer should learn all 4 of these languages. I have given you pointers, and based on these pointers and your own research, you should really try to drill down to the fact like what sort of programming style are you comfortable with, how much time can you devote towards learning new concepts like object-oriented programming and threading and things like that, and what your end goals are. Like, do you want to get employed? Do you want to become a proficient developer? Do you want to learn more about how the machine works, and several things like that. And that totally depends upon what your motivation is behind becoming a software developer or behind learning a programming language for the very first time. I have just given you pointers. Now, in case you like this video, please give this video a thumbs up, because that can be a really great indicator about that you guys have liked this content and I should be producing more such content. In case you did not like the video, there is a thumbs down button which you can press. Although I will appreciate if you can leave a feedback regarding what you want me to improve so that I can really step up my game as a content creator. Also, we talk about software development and software engineering, competitive programming, and everything related to that on this channel on weekly basis. So in case you are new here and you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to Rayn Studios YouTube channel and also press that bell icon so that you will be notified as soon as I upload something on this channel. Having said all of that, this is your guy Rajat Saxena signing off. Take care, bye bye, and I'll see you around.